This is my yarning story here. So the topic that I focused on was the life for Indigenous Australians pre and post contact, and that's from the Year 4 Australian curriculum for HAS. So there's my story there. I've just written it out. It's quite brief, but if you would like to just pause the video now and have a quick read. So with this story, it is easy to continue on and talk about what happened next, but the idea of this was to get my students to think about how it would make them feel if they were in the situation. So for this example, I stopped the story there, and from then I would introduce some thought-provoking questions that increases the understanding of what happened in this situation. So things like, who were the invaders? How would this make you feel? What do you think happened next? What would you do if you were in the shoes of this young Indigenous boy? As a future teacher of humanities and social sciences in primary schools, I aim to make each of my lessons fun and engaging ones. Going through school, I found history in particular to be a fairly dry subject. It was just a lot of memorising facts and numerous dates from our history. So in the future, I aim to produce fun, engaging, and most importantly, creative lessons that enable my students to enjoy history. The 8 Ways of Aboriginal Pedagogy was developed by Tyson Yunkaporta and is a series of pedagogies that allows teachers to use Indigenous knowledge as an outlet to educate students about the Aboriginal culture. It uses 8 types of pedagogy, however they all link together, and can also be used across multiple learning areas. So to start us off with the 8 ways of Aboriginal pedagogy, the first one I've got here is story sharing, and obviously we've already sort of touched on that with the yarning story, but the only other thing I thought I could do with Year 4 students, and even younger, would be to read a storybook, like a picture book. And I picked out a book by Ezekiel Morgan and Sally. I'm not going to even try and pronounce that last name, but it's there up on the screen. And it's a book called My Country. And so this is just about an Aboriginal child's connection to their place and what their land means to them. And I think that's really important, a really important part of Aboriginal cultural education for our students, to understand that real connection with the land that they're on. So the second pedagogical tool that I could use in my classroom would be the learning maps. And I think learning maps are great because, particularly for visual learning students, they can really organise their thoughts and ideas on a piece of paper and see where they are going with each of their thoughts. So it can come in the form of a brainstorm, and you can do that in a big group. You can have everybody pitching in ideas and sort of organise that into each topic or idea on their big piece of paper. But for our topic, for the life of Indigenous Australians pre and post contact, I think it would be appropriate to use a timeline. And I say this because it allows students to list or set out each event that happened across that time after the European settlers arrived, and they can arrange it in a chronological order that makes sense to them, and they can clearly see what happened over that period of time. So for the non-verbal pedagogy, I love non-verbal challenges for students because it really challenges their communication skills, which means they have to be creative in how they present what they are thinking. For this type of learning, I'd like to integrate a game of charades or something very similar, where they use non-verbal cues and try to explain a certain type of artifact or that they have been given. So this may include things like photos of rock carvings, spears or other hunting tools, or even, Aboriginal art. And so it means that students will have to think deeply about the meaning of each of these stimulus or artifacts and how they can really describe it in a thoughtful manner. And it sort of provokes a lot of thought. If we're playing a game and it's fun, it's interactive, I think that's great. So same again with the symbols or images. I would integrate that into the charades game, but I think that's a great thing because it sort of gives students, a real idea of life as an Aboriginal, and to see what they can come up with, particularly like the art samples and things like that. The Aboriginal art, they can really think about what that person was feeling when they did the art and see what meaning they can get out of each piece of art or whatever. Same with rock carvings and whatever. So symbols or images, I think, are really quite important. For the land links part of the pedagogy, I think it'd be really cool if students could picture where their home is right now and picture that so many years ago when the Aboriginals were inhabiting Tasmania or wherever they are, and create a piece of art, so a drawing or a painting or a watercolour or something like that, something creative, and produce an image that represents how their land now looked back when the Aboriginals were there, and to contrast the differences in that. And I think students can get a lot out of that because it's thought-provoking and they get to think about their connection to their land and then the connection that the Aboriginals may have had to that same area or land. The non-linear part of the 8 Ways pedagogy, I think, is super important. It basically means that we don't, in this type of pedagogy, we don't just have this one big continuous learning plan, and that it means that we can sort of jump from one part of the learning to another. And I think that's great because to be able to change it up and for it to be flexible, I feel like that's more effective for students and their learning, for them to gain an understanding. Once again, for the deconstruct and reconstruct part of the pedagogy, I'm going to use some of the Aboriginal art, and I think that's great because it's an artefact and it's quite thought-provoking because students are able to consider what is going on in the Aboriginal art and what that person was feeling or thinking or what events may have happened in order for them to create this piece of art. And I think that's super important to increase their knowledge and understanding of our students. So that's what I would use there. For the community links part of the pedagogy, I think it would be brilliant if I could sort of access somebody, an Indigenous elder or something like that, who could come in and have a bit of a talk with the students, get the students to prepare some questions, culturally sensitive questions, and if this elder had some stories to tell, I think that would be really good because it sort of allows the students to connect with the community and realise that there are people out there who know these things about Aboriginals. And I think it'd be lovely. It'd be better than just having someone to come in and tell them stories. Actually having an Indigenous person coming in, I reckon that would be very invaluable for the students. And so that brings us to the end of our 8 Ways Aboriginal Pedagogy video, and how I would implement this into my classroom. I have really enjoyed learning about this. I think it's really different, and it's a really creative way of teaching and engaging students in this type of cultural learning. So thank you for watching.